Welcome back to episode 3 of the 0 to 3k IO score challenge. Last episode we started to get into higher keys and got our item level to 460. We are at 1716 Raider.io score, so we only need about 300 more to get Keystone Master. We also completed our first plus 20, which was a huge step considering it was only the second episode of the challenge. Before we get into the video, I want to ask you guys a question in terms of the rules of this challenge. So, since this challenge started a few weeks into the patch, I want to know what your guys' opinion is on me using the Helm enchant from the raid. I can't complete the quest normally, as far as I know, since it is account wide, so it was already done on my main. So when I was doing raid in previous weeks, I just accepted the challenge, but I haven't been using the item, so I want to know, do you guys not want me to use it for the whole rest of the challenge, or do you want me to start using it in the next episode? I know there might be some conflicting answers on this, so whichever decision I see more comments of answers towards, I will go with. Once again, thank you guys all for the love on the recent videos. If you guys want to stay caught up on this series, then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. I also did a similar challenge last season to get to Keystone Hero as a balance druid, and I have a playlist on my channel if you guys want to check it out. Alright, it's time for our vault. So once again, we're probably hoping for a really good trinket, some tier pants maybe, any tier slot we don't have honestly. And yeah, so let's see what we get. Okay, so I'm not really sure about this trinket. Never really heard of it. Seems okay. It is insanely high item level. Or there's a hero track shield, which I know is pretty good. You already have hero track, but I think this one's better. Man, I am not sure. Not what we were hoping for. Alright, so I want you guys to let me know, but I personally think I'm gonna go with the trinket. It is okay from what I can tell. It's pretty much just a damage trinket, but honestly, this compared to the other shield, like, this is myth track, so if we think about it, like, I can't get this from running a key, and the only way that I can get any myth track is from my vault. So if I get a different trinket, it'll save me a lot of crests on upgrades, and I think it is a bigger increase right now. Like, it's 42 item levels, whereas this is literally 3. And we could also get the shield if we run a Tal Dazar. Granted, we would get it at a lower item level, but it'll be on the hero track, and there's a good chance we'll be running a Tal Dazar a lot because the cloak that drops from there is also the best cloak, I believe. So yeah, I think we're gonna go with the trinket here. Not necessarily the trinket we want at all, but I think we can't really complain about that. Yeah, so we're at 462, and we got our first myth track item. So it's time to get into some keys. Now, these keys are finally starting to feel like I have to pay attention to how many mobs I'm pulling, which cooldowns I have, dangerous abilities and spells I need to deal with. My perspective when I am tanking is a whole lot different compared to a DPS, where DPS I'm trying to think about how I can maximize my DPS and my own cooldowns, where as a tank I would say it's more about problem solving to keep things going smoothly so that my DPS can progress the key. So our first key was with a really strong group in terms of the players and the comp. We had a plus 18 Darkheart Thicket. Everything went quite smooth. We had good DPS and great healing. Pulls were pretty clean and plenty of interrupts to keep us safe. And I know in the last video I mentioned how I was struggling a bit when I had to deal with Oakheart on Tyrannical weeks, since it does insane damage to your tank, especially during the throw. This was a lot easier to deal with this time around, as I tried to plan my cooldowns to be more proactive about it. The first throw I got an external combined with Argent Defender and Eye of Tyr. Then the next one I used Guardian of the Kings. And finally, for the third one, I decided to bubble just to be safe. Another thing I got more comfortable with this week was using Hand of Sacrifice, or SAC, to try to spread out some of the damage in our group. These slime enemies explode, doing AoE damage to your group after they die, which is never really a threat to your tank, so I started using my SAC and my Word of Glories to make sure that nobody else died by getting caught off guard. Something else I have noticed, especially with keys in the 18 to 20 range, are that healers seem to have improved significantly in terms of how safe I feel as a tank, and the rest of the group even. I found so far that the 12 to 17 range seems like where it was more so an issue with healers in terms of them using cooldowns on me, or even just straight up healing throughput. Our DPS players seem a lot more confident with the common routes and strategies, which make things go a lot smoother. Another bonus to this key level is, since everybody wants to do 18s or above for the myth track items in their vault, there are a lot more players that won't leave right away after a single wipe or mistake. It is much more compelling to stick around for the completion even if you don't time the key, because the vault doesn't care if you time it as long as you actually complete it in the end. For this key, we got 22 score, and this was with another group that I asked if they wanted to do another key, since everybody basically carried their own weight pretty well, and it was a really successful key. Everybody but the mage stayed, so it was time for a plus 18 fall. We decided to shroud the first few mobs, which currently is my preferred strat for fall this week that I've been doing on my druid. Another thing that I asked advice for last week was the healing debuff tank buster from the first boss. It didn't feel nearly as bad with my better gear and larger health pool this week, but instead of just having my free Word of Glory and using that, I also had at least 3 holy power, so I could do 2 Word of Glories back to back, and this made it very manageable to deal with. The second boss on Tyrannical Week is a healer check fight that can break a lot of pugs. A few important tips for the fight are to make sure to dispel the squishier player first, since as long as they stand still in the light zone, the ring effect shouldn't do any damage to them. The other player with the debuff should pop a defensive or get an external cooldown, while the rest of the group is in the dark zone for the damage reduction. Overall, the orbs mechanic isn't too bad, as long as you are constantly paying attention to it and your positioning. Personally, I prefer to go right as a melee and hug the boss, and left as a ranged, but either way can work for sure, so just try them both out and see which one works better for you. I'm curious if any tanks know how I can judge how well I performed in a dungeon. I believe Warcraft logs aren't a reliable source because they only track my DPS numbers in terms of the parse you get, but I could be wrong about that. I find a lot of the skills that tanks have can't really be measured in a meaningful way, so when I'm talking about my improvements, it usually just comes from how a dungeon run felt in terms of flow. I haven't really changed any of my talents in either the protection talent tree or the class tree, so if there's any paladin players out there, I want to know if there are any talents that I should really consider taking, maybe depending on the dungeon or the affix. I think I have an alright understanding of my current toolkit, so I want to try to expand and continue learning if there are any options out there I should be considering. The whole key went pretty smooth and even better than our last one. We just barely missed the 3 chest, which gave us 96 score and a pair of leech bracers that I probably won't use since we already have some. I took a little break before doing another key, which was a plus 18 black rook hold. I feel like a broken record saying this, but once again, a good group that did solid damage, a few deaths, but those were mainly from the hunter, who is a pretty squishy class, so that's not really a problem. Sanguine is something that I've been alright dealing with, but not good at yet by any means. I'm still focused on what CDs to use, how to group mobs, and when to use my stops, so on Tyrannical weeks when things are dying so fast, I usually forget about the Sanguine until it is already dropped. I made a slight mistake here where I got one shot by one of the rocks on the second staircase. This room after the second boss is incredibly fun as a DPS player to absolutely pump on. I am curious though, what is the best way to group these mobs? I know I can use my divine toll, but once these mobs start jumping around and spinning, or others are breathing fire, I found myself just running around like a headless chicken, trying to group them up, which wasted lots of time on this key. Some of the util for Prop Alley is just really fun and satisfying. Using Bubble on the charge when fighting Smash Spite to get 2 stacks, or Sack on the last boss when it does the really big Shadow Bolt volley before you get the buff, both feel really satisfying. No loot, but we did get 149 score, which means we probably only need one more solid key to get Keystone Master. I also got a chest piece from the other paladin since there's a super tiny chance at some point we use it instead of our tier chest piece because the stats are pretty good. I was planning to craft the embellishment pants that give you a haste buff, so let me know which one you guys think I should craft next episode. Our next key, we got really lucky. I made a group for a plus 20 Galakron's Fall. We had an augmentation evoker, which is definitely a good pickup for this key since the timer is very free and it just comes down to living the tyrannical bosses. I think I now understand how to do the third boss as a tank. I am not 100% confident in it, but a lot better than when I first tried it. We got a 2 chest and we looted the cheat death trinket, which lots of you guys have been recommending for me to go for, so that's awesome to see. I am excited to play with it, and because of the score that we got, we are now at 2003 Raider.io score, so we have reached Keystone Master. This is a great achievement on our way to 3k IO, and we get a free heroic tier piece. I decided to buy a pair of tier gloves, and then head to the catalyst to turn our helmet that has a socket into tier. I'm pretty excited that we could reach KSM this fast, considering that when we did the first challenge last season, that was our original goal before we decided to keep going and try to reach Keystone Hero. So awesome to see. We also get our 4-piece now, which I think is a little bit overdue, but it's going to be awesome to play with. Don't get too excited though, as next up was a long and painful plus 20 Throne of the Tides. I was hoping to time this for hopefully another portal, and we haven't done it on Tyrannical Week yet, so we would also get a ton of score. It was also the last key that we needed for the weekly quest to get a piece of heroic loot from the raid. It was going really well until the third boss, who was doing tons of damage to me by the way. I managed to live the boss, but it did proc my cheat death trinket and was pretty stressful. One area of this dungeon that was always a little intimidating to me was the area right before the last boss because of the debuff that the little corruption ads give you. It basically gives you a stacking debuff that will increase the damage your group takes from the swell AoE ability from the larger elemental mobs. In this key level, if you get more than 10 to 15 stacks, it can be very dangerous, but the little corruption ads keep spawning. So I think the trick is to either go slow and wait for the big ad to come to you, and then once you kill it, go very fast all the way to the other side, and make sure to not be hesitant when you do commit. I think I handled it well enough in this run, but I am hoping to get some more practice with it, especially since it'll probably be way harder on fortified weeks. We had 8 minutes and lust for the last boss, but after attempt after attempt, we just couldn't kill it. I tried explaining to the DPS and the healer that when they get the blue beam, they always need to be standing in the black stuff on the ground, even if it looks like it's mostly gone. For the most part, they were standing in it, but I think we could have done a little bit of a better job. After 30 deaths and 9 minutes past depleted, we decided to call it quits. I still wanted a Throne of the Tides key, so I joined in 18. I will admit this group had considerably less DPS and heals, but we did have an augmentation evoker, so maybe that would make the difference. We didn't even kill the last boss before the key was depleted because our DPS was so low, but I didn't care. After how the last key went, 2 of us died, but the rest of us barely managed to phase the boss and kill it. I got 225 score, which makes me wonder, man, if we had timed that 20, how much score we would have got. And a shield that I doubt I will be using. Finally, to end off this episode, it is time to see what we get from our weekly quest. I got a Pips, which for my ranged alts would have been amazing, but I believe for Prot Paladin it's pretty subpar. I don't think it's very good since the only trinket it could replace would be our Myth Track trinket, which doesn't have a great effect to be honest, but it's still on the Myth Track and I feel like the item levels make it better. I would say the biggest thing we probably wanted was the Farok Rage Heart trinket, but oh well. One of the problems that I have noticed this character is running into is with the new upgrade system. We have reached a point where because my character is a tank and my score is getting a lot higher, I'm very desired for keys. I want to push high keys because I consider it the most fun, and I also want to get Myth Track items in my vault. This will only give us Aspect Crests though, and the majority of my gear requires a ton of Worms Crests before I can use the Aspect Crests. So because I still need more Worms Crests than I currently have, hopefully if I have time next episode, I will try to get into a heroic raid run, as I see it as a good way to get some gear like a better weapon and maybe the Farok trinket, as well as lots of Worms Crests so that we can spend our Aspect Crests eventually and tons of the Flight Stones that we currently have. We did end off today's episode at item level 464. Getting our 4-piece and Keystone Master in one video feels pretty good. I'm really glad we were able to get it so quickly, and for the next week, we should have 2 Mythic Plus vaults that will both be on the Myth Track. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you all next time.